Hey, this is Troy Taylor with the Championship Football Coaches Podcast, and we're sponsored by Rack Coach, Tip of the Spear, Sports Workbook, and the Top Hopper. Use the promo code TOPHOP to save 5% today. Today, we have Bob Sanders, who's coached all over college football in the NFL, and we have his longtime friend, Steve Saunier. Bob, for the people that are watching, we have some of your former players from the University of Richmond that said they would be tuning in. They may be asking questions here on the live chat. Tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from, Bob.
I grew up in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and just was a gym rat. Ended up going to school at Davidson, played small college football at Davidson. And once I graduated, started out as a high school coach, and then on to college, and then, on up into the NFL.
Yeah. And Steve, how did y'all meet?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. Got connected, started going to an FCA coaches camp in Black Mountain, North Carolina. That's where I met Clyde Christensen. And I knew Clyde through a mutual friend, Moose Morris, before then, but I knew Clyde was going to be up there. Then I met Coach Bob and many other great coaches and men that really just poured into my life, my children's life. And it's been an incredible, true, genuine relationship over the years. And I'm saying this is going back probably, I was going to FCA camp back in the 90s and then 2000, 2010s. And now we're in another decade, 2020. So it's been amazing. And it's just just such a positive, encouraging, relationships over the years. And I feel, my son went through cancer in 2019, and it was these guys who really was breathing life into us and supporting us in so many ways. And it was awesome. Just the support we got as a family. And that's just an example, but it was just over the years, it's been amazing. That's how Bob and I met.
Yeah. So Bob, I've been so impressed with Steve, only knowing him about a month since Coach McNally got on Twitter. So how do you feel about Steve, Coach? Can you tell me a little bit about maybe the first time you met him?
Well, anytime you can get a good friend that's genuine, has a great heart, a great family man, is a guy that if you want to know how to be a coach and be a good dad and a good husband, then he's a guy that you can look toward. He's been a good friend and has been there, as a friend, for a lot of years, and just enjoyed watching this family grow. It's been fun, up on the mountain, but, also professionally and then, just moving along in their careers and that type of thing. But Steve is just a genuine, excellent football coach, but a genuine human being, a genuine man, a man's man. That his yes means yes, his no means no, and the coaching profession is better off because of guys like Steve.
Thank you, Coach.
So Bob, were you aware that Jim McNally had made his way onto Twitter? When did you find out about this? Did you get a text message of him dancing to MC Hammer?
Hey, I can't say a word because I'm not on Twitter. So, but that's hard to believe that Coach Mac's on Twitter. That's very, very difficult for me to comprehend, really.
Well, I talked to him only once today, and that's because he's working out a guy from the practice squad from the Bengals, and he's went from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. with this kid. This is the second day in a row, and I think he charged him $100. It was supposed to be $200, and I was like, Coach, that's only $40 an hour. He was like, well, I wasn't going to do it for free, but my wife said I had to charge something. But he said he hasn't slept. He said he has not slept. He said he coaches every rep like it's the Super Bowl.
No, I don't know if the Bengals are going to get anything out of this guy after McNally gets done with him.
So he said he will be back on Twitter, but he's only got one more day. He's got to work with this kid. So after playing at Davidson, Coach, you go to Georgia. You went into high school because on the Wikipedia it says Georgia Tech. What high school did you go to, Coach? Because I love it that you coached high school.
I actually came home to Jacksonville, North Carolina. There was a new school. In fact, when I was in college in the summers, I helped in construction, helped build a school. And then when I got done in college, a lot of my junior high teachers and my junior high principal, my junior high coaches, went to this new high school. My brother-in-law was the head coach at the time. We didn't have any seniors, so he named me the defensive coordinator. I started 9 guys on defense that were 9th graders. And so it was a challenge. I think we ended up 5-5, with those guys, just playing a full varsity schedule right from Jump Street. But we had some pretty good athletes. And so it was a good experience. I coached football. I was a JV basketball coach. My old junior high coach was the varsity basketball coach. So I helped him. And then I was a track coach. He was my track coach. And so now he became my assistant. So we had a phenomenal time. It was just a great atmosphere, just coming back home and having the opportunity to work with a lot of people and, alongside a lot of people that had poured into my life as a junior high guy. So it was a great time.
How do you think that impacted your career? I mean, do you think that experience helped you once you got to college and then to professional football?
No, there's no question it did, because when you're a high school coach, which, I have the utmost respect for high school coaches, probably do the best job of, having interaction with kids, but I have the utmost respect because, I lined the field, and back then it was lime. I mean, I lined the field and cut the grass and, drug the softball field for the girls' coaches and, all the things that you take for granted sometimes as a college coach or in the NFL, we had to do ourselves. And so, from washing clothes, there was no job that was too small for us to do. So just coming from that background, I think, helps any coach, in preparation, and then being around good people too. There's no doubt about that. You kind of learn a little bit about integrity and character and hopefully the things that my teachers had taught me in junior high, they saw when I came back, and I saw it in action, standing shoulder to shoulder with them, working with them. And so there's no question that it helped me, in all the levels that I actually coached in.
Yeah. Steve, what are you thinking? You got anything you want to ask Coach?
Absolutely. Because I think the best coaches over the years learn how to do more with less. And what I mean, like what Coach Bob is saying, he had to cut the grass, line the fields, and do extra, because really, one lesson I learned when I was a graduate assistant, one of my mentors, and he said, no task is too small. No task is too small. And he always reminded me of a 13-word sermon. He said, do the best you can with what you have and do it now. And so don't complain. Just do the best you can with what you have and do it now. And that always stuck with me. And that was by Coach Dave Craigthorpe, who was a great mentor to me, one of my mentors. And I never forgot that. And no task too small. To this day, I don't treat a graduate assistant like he's below me. We're working side by side. Yes, I understand he's a graduate assistant, but I was a graduate assistant one time, and that young man has a future, and I'm going to pour my life into him, and I'm going to do whatever I can to help him get along and have him meet people and provide for him any way I can professionally. And I just think it's important. So I think the best coaches sometimes learn to do more with less.
I had I don't know if y'all know Chris Beatty, but he coached Percy Harvin in high school. And he was pretty good now here in Virginia. But Chris was a high school coach, and he had gone to Hampton University for 1 year to be the offense coordinator. Then he went to Northern Illinois, and he said there was this GA that was a defensive GA, and he was like the running back coach. But this defensive GA, all he wanted to do was watch film with the offensive guys, and nobody would watch film with them. And it turns out that guy is Brandon Staley. And that's how Chris Beatty got into the league, is when Brandon Staley became, the head coach of the Chargers. So that just Coach Bob, is there any instances like when I'm talking about, like where a guy like Brandon Staley's a GA, and then, somebody like Chris Beatty, gives him the time and shows him interest, and then later on, down the years, is there anything that you can recall in your time of a similar story?
I don't think there's any coach that is at the end of their career that didn't have someone that mentored them. I could go on and on. Dow Shealy and Steve Sloan and Ed Emery and just guys throughout my career that, Art Baker, Fisher DeBerry, all those guys poured into us when we were young coaches. And, I know you had Clyde on last week, and one thing, Clyde and I kind of grew up together, friends for over 40 years. And one of the things that we used to talk about is let's find some guys that do coaching at a high level that are good, good, honest men, that are good family men, that are good husbands, that are good dads. Let's find some guys like that, and let's watch them. Let's get around them. Let's let them try to pour into us so that we can learn how to do it the right way. And so I don't think there's any question that, especially when you get, I just finished my 44th year. So when you get back at the end of your profession and you're looking back at the blessings that you've had, but, just look back at the many, guys that you had. I mean, and they weren't all the college coaches. I mean, we had some very, very influential high school coaches. In fact, I played golf today with my position coach in football and my head basketball coach. He's 82 years old. I talked to my college coach on the way to play golf. He's going to be 89, I think. So they still influence me, and I am grateful, and I could, I'm trying to, to carry on that legacy, and I hope I make them proud of, the amount of time they poured into me, and, and hopefully, I've been able to, hopefully pour into someone else, but just I'm grateful for, the number of guys, and if you're a young coach and you're not looking for those right kind of people, to see and to follow and to see how they do it and to question them and talk to them, if you're not doing that, then you're making a mistake, because, to me, that's the essence of a hard job, is finding guys that are doing it at a high level, but doing it the right way.
Yeah. I texted Steve a little bit earlier, and I asked him, I said, hey man, for somebody that's never seen the podcast, how would you explain it to him? And Steve, you texted me a very extensive, thorough answer. And it's pretty high level. I don't know where you went to college, but I went to Clinch Valley College. All right. And that's in Wise, Virginia, man.
Hey, I know Sonya. His wife might have written it for him.
Steve, what would you tell someone? Because, I mean, we want to, 1, change lives. 2, we want to help get people to the next level. And 3, we want to build champions for life. Then our football program at LC Byrd High School in Richmond, Virginia, and through this podcast, which used to be an in-person clinic, Bob, and we took it to a podcast. I mean, when we've been able to affect so many more people and reach so many people. So, Steve, how would you explain the podcast to someone who had never seen it?
Absolutely. No, I feel it's a very informative way to connect and listen to coaches and players, because you've had players on, I know you, who have devoted really their whole lives to their profession, whether you're a player and then they've gone on the coach. I think it's a great opportunity to ask questions like we're doing, and people will hopefully chime in and ask questions and gather information as you decide as an individual, where you want to go with your profession. Because obviously most of the people here are going to be coaches listening to it. So I just think it's a great, resource that they could tap into, because Troy, you've done an amazing job with getting so many.
Blessed, man.
You really have in so many ways of getting people on this podcast, and all they got to do is chime in and ask questions. And then I look at them, I see hundreds and thousands of views once, because even when we're done, people are going to watch it over again. You see all the views. It's amazing how many people that you could really touch and reach through this. So it's to me, it's made an impact. It really has. And then I'm excited, and like I said, I want to do everything I can to be an ambassador to the game, because I know the game has really done a lot for me. It's really helped me in my life, get an education. It's helped me, get around good people. My core values because of football. My faith has grown because of football. It's just amazing. I met my wife through football. So it's a great podcast, and I've learned something every time I listen to someone on this podcast. So to get Coach Sanders on here is awesome. And again, I think he has a great story to tell. And again, I just encourage people to listen and ask questions, because it's truly a man who's done it, who's had incredible experience and who's reached the top levels and coached Hall of Famers and won national championships, Super Bowl. So I just think it's a great opportunity for everyone who's starting. And I love the fact, like Coach Bob said, he started out, in high school and junior high, and then opportunities. And I just think the Lord has blessed him. I really do. I just think the Lord has blessed his efforts. And I think it's great to see that happen too. I always say it's great to see good things happen to good people. And it's awesome. And that's what I love about, coaching, the coaching profession.
Yeah. And I don't know if y'all was at the convention, but I was there and I was walking around like I was a homeless person. I didn't even pay. I just went in the place and I just started walking around getting free stuff. And I stopped at this table for the first down playbook. And I was talking to a girl. She looked like a point guard. I mean, she was an athlete. But then a guy sat down. He said he was from Riverheads or from Waynesboro. And he just called me, and I know y'all know him. Yeah, Charlie Coynier. Y'all know Charlie?
No, of him. I don't know him personally, but I know of him.
Yeah, Coach.
Yeah,
Charlie. That was in the NFL. He's going to be coming on tomorrow. So, I mean, I just met him at the beginning of the year, and it's just amazing. So, Coach, how did you make the jump from high school to college? Because it said 1978. That was the year I was born. I'm 44. You went to Georgia Tech.
You didn't have to throw that in.
Yeah, Coach. But I got gray hair. I mean,
actually, I had stayed at Southwest for 2 years, and how you get that call to Wild every now and then. But I ended up interviewing and getting a head high school job at Wake Forest Roseville High School. And I had never been on offense. So my old college coach was on Pepper Rogers' staff at Georgia Tech, and they were having a summer camp. So I called him and asked him if I could come and, maybe spend some time on offense there. So just learn some offensive, some offensive football. And he said, sure. So when I got there, they were shorthanded on defense. So I spent the week on defense. I don't think I breathed a word of offense other than to try to get after them in the 7-on-7s and those kind of things. And at the end of the week, Coach Rogers called me in and said, hey, we got this job. And back then it's what was called a part-time coach. It was the same thing as a GA, but you didn't have to go to class. You made what an in-state student made. And he said, we'd like to offer you that job. So I called the principal that had just hired me. And he said, heck, you're 24, 25 years old. He said, you'd be crazy not to go and work for Pepper Rogers. So I ended up resigning before I even went to Wake Forest Roseville High School, and ended up going to Georgia Tech, to work. And that's where I met Coach Ed Emery, and again got to work with my old college coach, and certainly with Coach Pepper Rogers, and so it was just a great staff. Coach Spurrier ended up coming into spring. I left. Norm Van Brocklin was on that staff. So there's some real characters of, of football that I got to at least spend a little bit of time with. I had been married for about 9 months or 10 months. And my wife, was expecting our first, expecting our first child. So I said, I better get a real job. So I went back and became a head coach at Douglas Byrd High School in Fayetteville, North Carolina for 6 months. And then Ed Emery got the East Carolina job. So I jumped back to college 6 months later. So that was kind of how that little run right there.
Yeah.
Pretty fast.
That was a busy time, Coach.
It was
Coach,
a lot of fun.
Coach Totem down here, he's the offensive line coach at Walkertown High School in North Carolina. And he went down to North Carolina practice today, and he got to meet Clyde Christensen. He said, big time, love it, Troy. He has his own podcast. He's having an offensive coordinator clinic virtual on April 15th. But then, Coach, after being in East Carolina, you end up at Richmond. And there was there was one guy in particular that was on Facebook. I think he might have changed his last name in 1991 or something. He was saying that you were his coach at the University of Richmond. He was supposed to watch. Talk about that, Coach. Going from East Carolina to University of Richmond.
I was in East Carolina for 3 years, and there were a lot of trying circumstances at the time. We had a really good football team. And I was at Black Mountain, North Carolina. I was going to work a boys conference, and I was standing in line registering, and the head coach at the University of Richmond was a guy named Dow Sheely, and he was standing in line with his son. He was checking his son into camp, and we got to talking, and he said, "Hey, Coach Bob, I got a linebacker job." He offered me, he doubled my salary. So I got out of line. He said, "Where are you going?" I said, I'm going with you. And he said, no, you just go through camp. You got to come meet the coordinator and everything. So, I spent the week there working the FCA camp, the boys camp there, did the football clinics and stuff. And then that weekend I went and spent the weekend, in Richmond. And the first year, I think he was 0-10 when I went. We were 1-9. And then the second year, the president called us in and said, "Hey, you got to win more than you lose." We had 10 games, and we ended up going to the quarterfinals of the 1AA playoffs. Lost a heartbreaker, but it was a really good run there at the University of Richmond. Enjoyed it, Coach Sheely was one of my main mentors. A great story on Coach Sheely. Art Baker had gotten the East Carolina job 70 miles from my home. And so he called me, and he called Clyde, and he said, "Hey, I want to get y'all to come." He said, "I want to get you to come back. I want to get Clyde to come." And it was in the spring. And so Coach Sheely actually stayed after work with me for about a week. And we'd sit there every afternoon from like 5 to 8:30, 9 o'clock every day, for like a week or more. And just talked about life and football and, and he said, "I don't think this is the one." I said, "Coach, I said, I'm 1AA here. I want to get back to 1A. It's 70 miles from my home. He goes, "It's not the one." And, through a little decision process, it proved that, I ended up not going, but mainly based on what Coach, Sheila said. And, how you never get a job in the summer. Well, that summer, I got a call from Richard Bell and Steve Sloan, and they offered me a job at Duke. And so just that spiritual guidance, from Coach Sheely, him investing time in me, when he could have been home with his family in the off season, those kind of things, it just meant a lot to me. But, so when I went to tell Coach Sheely, that I was leaving in the summer, which you never do that, it just doesn't happen. You never get a job in the summer. Actually, in fact, this is my second job I'd gotten in the summer because, I ended up going to Georgia. I ended up, at Tech in the summer. And then this one, he kind of acted like he was going to get mad. And his wife happened to be there. She said, "Dow, don't even try." Then he just busted out laughing. He said, "This is the one you've been waiting on." And so he gave me his blessings to go. So, that's how I actually went to Duke. It was in the summer.
Steve, what are you thinking, Steve?
Well, no, it's awesome how you just see how someone's career, progresses. A lot of times people want to say, it's not, what it's who you know. I don't agree with that. It's how you're known, because if Coach Sanders was known as a poor worker, I guarantee you he doesn't get those recommendations and people aren't looking for him. So it's important to know people. Don't get me wrong, obviously, especially good people, but I always tell, when I feel as I'm getting older, getting in the mentor stage, it's like, guys, it's not who you know. Yeah, it's important you get to know people, but it's how you're known. If you're known not to be a good worker, a lazy person, getting out of the office first thing, that's not a good way to be known. I tell the guys I coach, as a player, your teammates, as you guys come back for reunions, you're going to be known as something. So what kind of teammate do you want to be remembered as? So when you bring your kid for reunions, you want your teammates pointing, "Oh, hey, I want you to go meet so-and-so because, he was a great teammate of mine, or "Oh, no, I don't want to go talk to him because he, so I think it's how you're known. And I just think it's important, one other thing I learned from it, every day is an interview. When you're getting into coaching, you're first getting into coaching, as a part-time coach, a graduate assistant, every day is an interview. It really, because because you have a job to do. And when my son was an intern, he was an intern at NC State in the weight room. He said, "Dad, every day is a major production," and it's so true to hear him say that. And it's so true. So every day is a big day. It really is. Every day means something. So, that's what I say.
I mean, and like both instances where you got promotions and the guys that loved you, they were happy. And sometimes, people, they'll be mad that you're leaving, but those people really don't care about you, because when people care about you, they're happy for your success, even though you may leave them. Can you talk on that a little bit, Bob?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think, that's one thing I always try to do when I was looking for a job. Of course, I was always looking for an opportunity. Sometimes I was looking in the wrong places, but just having that spiritual relationship and just trusting the Lord, he put good people in my life, and I invested time in others. I invested time going to camps and working, with FCA kids, and a lot of that was just so my family could go to camp, because I didn't have enough money to bring them, at that time, but having good people, and when you're around good people, they want to see you move up and have success. I've been blessed, throughout my career, being around those kind of people. I can't remember a time that, that someone wanted me to stay and I wanted to go, and they, were mad because I decided to go. Now I've been sent packing a time or two, but that is a part of just being around good people, and hopefully, as you look for jobs and as you see guys you want to be around. I didn't really know Coach Shealy when he offered me a job. I didn't really know him. I had been in an FCA camp where he and his wife, it was one of the first coaches camps they had, and he and his wife were the keynote speakers. It was actually, Steve, you know where the Baby Center meeting is?
Yes, sir.
That's where the whole coaching FCA coaches camp was in that one little room
upstairs.
Yeah. So that's how I knew Coach Shealy, just from coming to FCA camp, and so I knew if I could find guys that believed the same way I did, that had a spiritual, had a solid spiritual walk, that, I would enjoy working with them. And so I was blessed to be around guys that were happy, when I got those opportunities. And I've been a defensive coordinator when my guys got a chance to move, or, just been on the staff or whatever. When my guys got to move, I was happy for them too.
Like I tell my players, there's this pro wrestler, and he's got this Mark Marrow. He's like a motivational speaker. He was Johnny Be Good, but he says, "Show me your friends, I'll show you your future." And then like Mr. Beast, who's like the biggest guy on YouTube right now, he said, the cheat code to life is to surround yourself with people you want to be like. And I'm not even smart enough to surround myself with people, but it just seems like I'm just so blessed, and the Lord has brought like so many great people, like Coach McNally. Like, heck, I've only known him 2 months. I mean, he FaceTimes me, and he makes fun of me and tells me I need to lose weight, and I mean, I love it. It's the best. So I mean, so you get to go to Duke. So I mean, you're back in Division I, and then does Coach Spurrier come and be the head coach?
Actually, I went to Duke with Steve Sloan, and I was there with 2 years, with Coach Sloan. Richard Bell was another influential guy in my life. Great family man, great football coach. He was at one time the head coach at South Carolina, but he was our defensive coordinator, and probably he, along with Norm Parker, who was at East Carolina at the time, was a former coordinator at Iowa, has passed away, but was a dear friend and mentor. But I went actually with Coach Bell and Coach Sloan. Two great men of God and great coaches. And, but Coach Sloan ended up getting the Alabama AD job. So that's when Coach Spurrier came in. I was actually spring with Coach Spurrier at Georgia Tech. When Coach Spurrier came to Duke, he bought offensive guys, but we had had played some pretty good defense. So he ended up keeping our whole defensive staff intact. And that's when I started working for Coach Spurrier.
Steve, what you thinking?
Oh, well, yeah. And the success they had at Duke, they won the ACC championship in football at Duke University when Coach was there with Coach Spurrier, and even backing up East Carolina. Oh my goodness, back in those days when Coach was there, they were unbelievable. I when I remember one year, the top of my memory, one year East Carolina lost 3 games, and it was to Miami, Florida, and Florida State, and they were all ranked in the top 10, and they were 8-3 that year. Am I correct, Coach? I mean, It was unbelievable success everywhere he's been. I really think the Lord has blessed him with success, and I think it's awesome. And talk about the impact. I got to see. I recruit the Panhandle of Florida. We're West Florida in Pensacola, so I recruit the Panhandle. Then I go down to some parts of Southwest Florida. But it's awesome to bump into someone, and Bob Sanders' name pops up because when Coach Bob was coaching at University of Florida, he had an impact. I got to meet Jimmy Ray Stevens. I bumped into Steve Spurrier Jr. last year in recruiting, and he talked about the impact Coach Bob had on Steve Spurrier Jr. when he was a younger coach and a player at Duke and the whole deal. So he talked very highly of Coach Bob. So it's awesome the impact and influence a coach can have on so many people. And so it's great to hear. So, but yeah, let Coach Bob talk about. Seriously, I mean that they were so successful at East Carolina and at Duke, and then of course Florida. They won a national championship. So it's pretty awesome. The success they had on the field. Because I think sometimes in this world, they're not going to listen to Coach Sanders unless they know he's a winner on the field, but then they realize, something special about this guy and some of the coaches. So it's pretty cool because, he's won everywhere he's been. It really has. So, Coach, if you don't mind talking about your success, you built the program at East Carolina, and then Duke, you won an ACC championship. I wouldn't mind hearing that.
Well, at East Carolina, they had a pretty good, a really good situation. Not many people at that time recruited in Eastern North Carolina, and there were a lot of really good players. And so we kind of honed in, at East Carolina. I actually left before that year you're talking about. I actually left the year before that. I went to Richmond. But that team the year before, I think we had a big year the year before, my last year there. And then that next year, I think after that year, they had 8 or 9 guys drafted off that team. So it was a very good football team. And a lot of times it's not the X's and O's, it's the Johnnies and Joes, So we had good players. And then at Richmond, the same thing. We had, it started out, we said, we got to change the culture. So I had a young man, he's now a referee. I'm not sure what conference he's in now, but he was in the Big East. I'm not sure who he's with now, but his name is Troy Gray. And so I talked Troy, he was a linebacker. I talked Troy, I said, Troy, you got to do something extra. So Troy would bring a guy, and after supper, they would come over and watch tape. Well, we won a game. Well, the next week there was 6 or 8 guys, and we won another game. Well, the next week there was 8 or 10 guys, and we won another game. Well, the next week, by the time about 2 or 3 weeks was done, after supper, we had guys sitting on the filing cabinets, on the desk, and all the chairs. We had basically the whole team was coming over, and the culture changed overnight just by guys that cared. And because players don't care what until they know that you care. And they knew, Coach Shealy had set the tempo for us, and we loved those guys up. And we had a big year. We ended up having a big year. And then at Duke, we actually had good teams the year before we won it. But again, just talking about using what you had. What Jim Collins and myself were the co-defensive coordinators in that 89 team. So what we did is we sat down and we listed our top 11 players. We didn't worry about position. And they're the guys we put on the field. Mm-hmm. And the idea of double training guys, if you were a right tackle, and you were backup right tackle, but if you were the next best, if the left tackle went down, if you were the third tackle, then we wanted you to go into the game. So, the double training and playing your best guys, our third corner was actually an outside linebacker for us. And so people would why trade into him to try to run at him. And so what we decided to do was say, hey, we know they're wide trading into him to run him. They're not going to throw the ball. So we would just blitz him. And he was so quick, he could jump around blocks. And he made just a million plays. We used to call him Run Around Rodney, because he would run. But the idea of coaching, you have to take, and I learned this really good from Coach Spurrier. You can't you can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and getting the same results. You got to change something, and so under the leadership and guidance of Coach Spurrier, we were able to, to change some things, move some stuff around, and ended up having a big year there, at Duke. I had some big years at Florida. The year we won the national championship probably wasn't our best team, even though we were really, really good. But it was a team that loved each other. We had a bunch of guys that cared about each other and loved each other. It hasn't always been that way for me because I had a little stretch there. Probably, I think I was relieved of my duties like 5 times in 7 years. Even though I got retained a couple of times, I was retained with the new coach that came in. So I kind of got in that little swing opposite Clyde. Where Clyde was there with with Peyton and then Luck and then Brady. I used to mess with him and say, what sin did I do that you get to be on those guys' team all the time? And but so I was, kind of, I came up a little bit different in the NFL than Clyde did, but still richly blessed and wouldn't trade 1 second of it, for the experience that I had. But but just fortunate to be around a lot of good players that cared about it. I was telling some guys the other day at Florida when we were there, a guy loafs or somebody, we never had to worry about it because the guys police themselves. They say, hey, coach, don't worry about it. We'll handle this. Or there'd be a guy in the huddle. They would send him out, say, coach, we don't want him in here with us until he changes his heart.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's when you have really good guys, and the atmosphere and the culture is like you want it when guys are doing that.
Talk a little bit about Coach Spurrier, Steve Spurrier, Coach. What is so good about him as a man and as a coach?
Probably the most instinctive guy I've ever been around. I could probably, if I sat and thought about it, probably 20 times, especially at Duke when the crowds weren't quite as big, or at Florida when they could shut them down. Probably, the number of times I've heard Danny or one of the quarterbacks, Steve Slade, somebody make a check and he said, no, and he'd make the check and bam, touchdown.
Wow.
He was one of those guys that you never felt that you couldn't come back no matter what the odds were. We beat Auburn one year. We had 6 turnovers and beat Auburn. So I mean, anytime you have 6, you turn the ball over 6 times and still win a game. But we always felt we could win, and the confidence. A lot of people said it was a cockiness, but to me, it was a confidence that he had that was contagious to all the players, and he wasn't afraid to change or to try something different or to go against the grain, so to speak. And just having the opportunity to work with him and to watch him on a daily basis was just it was a blessing. I actually had 15 years with Coach Spurrier. Had 3 at Duke, 11 at Florida, and 1 in the AAF with the Orlando Apollos. So somebody said, y'all getting a band back together. We had a bunch of guys in Florida. Jimmy Ray was with us. He said, you guys getting a band back? I said, yeah, but it's like the Rolling Stones now. It's a bunch of old dudes,
I was at a clinic once, and I asked the receiver coach, I said, how do y'all teach a curl? And the coach said, well, I coached for the greatest curl coach of all time. And I'm a young coach. I said, well, who is that? He said, Steve Spurrier. And I was like, okay, get 12 yards and the quarterback will throw you open. Yeah, that's a good answer, man.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
The greatest curl coach. I mean, that's a long time. And I mean, I visited University of Florida when I had a player named Morgan Moses who plays for the Ravens now, and Urban Meyer was the coach. And Urban Meyer said, if you find a better place with better weather and better academics and better football, tell me, because I want to go there and be the coach. Yeah. So, I mean, Gainesville is special, right, Coach?
No question. Very special. Great fans, great people, great academics.
Chomp.
Yeah. And a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Man, what you thinking, Steve?
Coach, you correct me if I'm wrong. You personally recruited the Heisman Trophy winner, right? Yes.
Yeah, Danny was from out there your way. He was from Fort Long Beach.
Yeah, that's
that
right.
year, in fact, I was recruiting Danny Werfel, Peyton Manning, and a guy named Josh Booty. Josh Booty played
LSU.
Yeah, he played at LSU, but he actually went and played baseball initially and then came back to LSU or vice versa. But I was recruiting those three guys. And so I lost Peyton to Tennessee and Josh to baseball and LSU. And then, of course, Danny came and, the rest was history. Just a phenomenal impact on a university. Unbelievable. I was the faculty rep for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And the first meeting I went to, I think it was me and two or three others. I think maybe three others. And when Danny and them went through, we were meeting. We had a businessman in town that actually was the mentor. All I did was get the place and get yelled at by the AD and almost get fired. But when Danny and them were there, we had our own band. We were meeting, 300 or 400 every Wednesday night. Wow. And then when Danny graduated and would come back, we would have 700-800 kids at FCA on a Wednesday night at the University of Florida. And it was unbelievable. So what those guys did.
Is it fair to say the impact he had is kind of what Tim Tebow had the impact on the university before?
No question. Without a doubt, very similar. I would say, actually mirrored, and a lot of good guys were on that team too. I mean, we had Fred Taylor, dotted the I. We had Yada Walker. We had Ike Hilliard. He was one of the wide receivers. Riedel Anthony, Jaquez Green. If you remember that game, I mean, it was just it was a game. We were number one in the nation and went to Florida on the last game of the year. We were beat up. Had about 4 or 5 starters, 6 starters out, but nobody said anything at Florida because it was always the next man up. That's the way Coach Spurrier did it.
Yeah.
And I think we got beat. I don't remember the exact score, but it was like 21-17, 24-17, something like that. It was close. And then we got healthy. And when we went to the Sugar Bowl, the way things fell for us, a lot of guys had to win, lose. About 3 or 4 things had to happen, and everyone happened. And I can remember walking in at the Superdome. The locker room had a lot of different rooms, and my guys were in one of the rooms. I walked in there, and every one of them, you could see the tear tracks, on their cheeks. It was like 2 hours before the game. They were sitting there crying. I mean, so I didn't even say a word. I said, "Hey, it's on tonight," and we turned them every way but loose that night. So it was a good game. But especially with Danny and those guys, it was a special team.
You mentioned like recruiting Danny Werfel and then losing out Peyton Manning, but who are some of the best recruiters that you ever worked with, and what made them so good?
I think I don't know. It's kind of hard to say because how do you determine if a guy's a great recruiter or not? Because I've been on staffs where guys would recruit 8 or 9 guys. And you might have 2 or 3 backups out of their 8 or 9. And I've been, in the same year, another guy may recruit 3 guys, and 2 of them are All-American, and the other is a full-time starter. So who's the best recruiter? One signed 9 and one signed 3. So you say, well, I mean, are you talking numbers? But I think the main thing in recruiting is, and I know it's a lot different now, so I don't mean to make light of it, Steve, because I know you guys go through craziness now, but back then it was, I think, we had a good bunch of guys. Woody McCorvey was, Alabama, and guy named Joe Witt. All of us were good friends. We would recruit together. Me and Mickey Andrews from Florida State would ride together in the spring and, stay at the same hotel. Well, we'd walk into school together and say, well, how do you want to do this? Who wants to go first? And he goes, no, we're riding together. We need to leave at the same time. So we're going in together, so we just were friends. But it was a time, I think guys wanted truth. They wanted to be, they didn't want to be pumped up. It wasn't that kind of, everybody wins a trophy time yet. And So, I think the best recruiters were the guys that were just honest and straightforward. And I think God honored that. There were a lot of guys, that were cheating back when I was in college football. But, and I've lost guys, and I've had alumni, especially out there in that panhandle. They say, why didn't you recruit this guy? I said, well, he went to this school and we've beaten him 8 times in a row. So that's the guy they're recruiting. We're trying to get a different guy, So, I think you just have to stand firm and be honest and straightforward. And guys in the NFL, I think, or in college or in high school, if they truly believe you love them and you're trying to help them and they think you're helping them, then I think, I could walk in anywhere. Yeah, I could walk in anywhere and, just explain, hey, I'm trying to help somebody. And, it really didn't matter,
Steve, what you thinking?
No, I love that. And along with that, I really believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Coach Bob, players want answers. And I think it's our job as coaches to become the best coaches, to be competent in what we're doing, not just confident, but competent, and so that's why I think it's important to reach out. And you have this attitude that, you never arrive as a coach. You could, I feel I'm a better coach now than I ever have been, not because I'm older, because I got more experience, but I keep learning and keep learning and keep learning along the way. So I feel that's one thing, my head coach would always think is one thing I love about you, Steve. You're always learning. You're always willing, to meet someone else and learn and ask questions. So I think that's so important because, and coach, he's coached at the highest level. And, if a player knows you can help him, he will listen to you and he will believe in you and he will play hard for you. But if you're just a talker and a yeller and that's all you do, and you're not helping them, I don't think you're going to get the most out of that young man. And I just think players want answers, and I think it's our job as coaches to get those answers. Correct, Coach?
I think you're exactly right. I've never been in a math class where everybody was screaming and hollering and cussing. A lot of people told me, the first NFL game the first regular season NFL game I ever saw, I coached in. I had never seen a regular season NFL game, and they said you can't coach NFL if you're not going to be a screamer and a holler and a cusser. Well, I had a guy tell me one time, said, I've never seen a guy get their rear end wore out and not hear one cuss word. I've never seen anybody do that except you. I mean, but I just didn't think you had to cuss. And now, I mean, have you got to raise your voice sometimes? Yeah, you do, because you got to. I think players want enthusiastic coaches that care, and you got to coach like you care. So then if it means something, then you want them to be right all the time as best you can. But as far as cussing and raising sand that way, and again, I think God honors those little things. If you're faithful in the little things, then I think God gives you bigger things to handle. I just believe that. I remember at Florida, I was the camp director for 11 years.
Wow.
Camp director. And, and they used to make fun of me. Coach Spurrier used to call me super camper and try to make fun of me and everything. But I'll stand on this. He never had one complaint about camp in my 11 years.
That's awesome.
And when a guy came to Florida to go to summer camp, the coaches hated me. But I said, hey, we're going to coach them. We're going to coach them just like we coach our guys. I had kids that would sleep on the floor in my room because they'd never spend a night away from home. And I'd get letters during the middle of the season. Hey, Coach Bob, thanks for helping me spend the night. I never stayed overnight at a place. And I went to church camp after I left Florida. So I got to go to another camp. Those little things, I think God says, okay, fine. You say you want to be a coach. You say you want to be a people person. Let me see if you mean it or if you're just giving it lip service. And I do agree with what Steve said. I think, again, players, in recruiting, and I think players that you're coaching, I think they want to know that you care about them. They want to know that you know what you know. My granddad used to say, hey, always stay green, because if you go to the next step after green, then that means you start to rot. Mm-hmm. So once you get mature, if you think you're mature and you don't have to learn, then you start to rot, So mm-hmm. I can't tell you how much I learned last year, just working for Todd Bowles. I mean, just a different way to do things, but a very, very smart man, and was grateful, for that opportunity. Just, the amount of stuff I learned last year after many years in coaching, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, and he was outstanding, as far as, the things I learned. So there's no question, you got to stay on top, and you got to keep learning, and you got to stay involved, and you got to get on the podcast, and you got to do the things that it takes to stay at the top level, because as Christians, we're called to be the best. We should be the best coaches. We should be the best people. We should be the best husbands, fathers. We should be, because God calls us to our best. And when we take, advantage of those little things, I think God honors that.
So you've spent, probably close to 20 years at college, coaching college football. 22 years and coaching defense. What are three things that you hung your defenses on? What's the three things that you always preached to have a successful defense?
Get low, come hard, and never quit, never give up. I don't know.
I got to write that down.
Football is not that
Get
hard.
Low, look, come hard,
and never quit or never give up, because it's blocking and tackling, and low man wins, and you got to tackle hard, and you got to play hard. What you'll find, when you get to, West Florida or University of Florida, or if you get to the NFL, what you're going to find is, or at Byrd High School, what you're going to find is the team that plays the hardest, the longest, normally wins. Now, I know there's turnovers and there's a lot of things that happen, but how many times have you been in a game as a player or a coach when you played against a better team and you just outlasted them? Just because you wanted, you just kept playing, and if something good happened, you kept playing. If something bad happened, you kept playing. It was just a continual, come at them. And we had a 13-3 year that ended up a 14-4 year in Green Bay with Charles Woodson and Al Harris and Aaron Campman and those guys. Lost in the NFC Championship game at home when Favre threw an interception in overtime. But it was just those guys. They had a never say die attitude, and it was just but low pads, aggressive playing, and then never quitting and never giving up. I think those are characteristics that you can take to the bank.
That's awesome.
Steve, what you thinking?
No, so I want to, so 22 years in college, now the opportunity to go to the NFL. How did that all come about? And you had a piece about it, obviously great opportunity. And since then, correct me if I'm wrong, Coach, you have not been back to college, correct? Since the NFL. Okay,
I have not been back.
Yeah, Coach McNally always says, well, this guy was, he was with the Lions for 2 years. And then he was with this guy. And then he always says, well, he didn't stay. I was like, is there something to that, Coach?
Yeah, well, a lot of times you don't have an option.
Yeah.
You don't have that option. So, but, I had interviewed. I was at home one day making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I got a phone call. And he said, this is Jim Mora from the Indianapolis Colts. I thought it was one of my buddies was messing with me, So, yeah, right. Okay, Coach. Hey, how you doing? But it actually was. And so I went up there and interviewed and did not get the job. But I had invested a lot of time. Clyde was with the Buccaneers. I got to be good friends with Tony and Lovie Smith and Monty Kiffin and all those guys, and they opened the door for me. I sat in meetings and just learned so much. Rod Marinelli, I just can't tell you how much I learned from Rod Marinelli. Just great people, that were with the Bucs, and it all stemmed from my relationship, with Clyde. I was at the University of Florida, so I was close, and so I was at Florida, and I heard there was a job at with the Dolphins. So I sent my stuff in, and in fact, Jim Bates was there, and so I called Jim. He said, I think he's already hired somebody. So I said, okay. So I was, like I said, the faculty rep for FCA. My daughter went to Florida. She was a video girl for women's basketball, but she was playing, the FCA softball team. She said, Dad, I want you to come out and meet this guy that I think I may want a date, but I want you to meet him and see if he's okay. I said, okay. So I go out there, watch the game. I get home about 8:30. My wife's got some soup and sandwiches and stuff. And Troy and Steve, this was not something weird. Okay, don't think this is something weird, but the Holy Spirit moved in my heart and told me to get up and drive down to Miami. So at 8:30 at night, I get up, I give me some clothes. My wife said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm gonna ride down to Miami." Well, it's not like a little ride over to, it's about a 6-hour trip, So she said, "Why?" I said, "I'm gonna try to see this guy named Dave Wanstead." So she asked me, "Do you know him?" I said, "No, I don't know him." She said, "Is he even there?" I said, "I don't know, but I just feel like I need to go." So I ended up driving down there and had to stop and ask the next morning. I didn't know where the facility was. I'd never been down there or anything. And so I go there, I get there about 7:00. I asked for Coach Bates, and he came down and he was gracious enough to bring me in and ask Coach Wanstead if he would be gracious enough to meet with me, which he did. And so at the point he met with me, he gave me maybe 12 minutes. And I'm a stutterer, so that's only about 6 minutes worth of talking. So in those 12 minutes, I told him why I wanted to work for him and why he ought to hire me, how I thought I could help him if he hired me. Wow. She said, "Are you down here recruiting?" I said, "No. I drove down here last night to tell you that I want to work on your staff."
Wow.
And he looked at me like I had 4 eyes, and okay, fine, I'm pray about whatever. And, so 12 minutes later, I'm back in the car, headed back down the turnpike back to Gainesville. The next morning at 8:00, I had worked out. I came up to my desk and Coach Spurrier walked in and said, "Hey, are you interested in going to Miami?" I didn't tell him I was going down there. I told John Hoke, he was our defense coordinator. He's the only one that knew I went down there. And he said, "Are you interested in going down there?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, Dave Wanstead just called me. I think he's going to hire you. He's waiting on your call." So I called him back. And we talked about 3 more minutes. And he said, "Can you come back down?" I said, "I'm on my way. So I'm going to fly you this time." So I ended up driving down to Orlando, got on a plane, and walked into his office about 1:30. He said, "I don't know why I'm hiring you other than to say I want to hire somebody that really wants to be here with us. And for some reason, I really think you want to be here with us." The point of the story is a number of years later, he and I were working together again in Buffalo. And we were out to supper with our wives one night. And he told me out of his own mouth, he said, "Bob, I tried to hire 13 guys before I hired you. But that's how God works. It was my job. And it was it was in God's timing. And he put me in the NFL. So that's, so I started, heck, I had Zach, like I say, the first game was against the Tennessee Titans. I'd never seen a regular season game. I mean, I'm standing there just looking at the lights and the scoreboard. And that was my first experience in the NFL, was with the Dolphins. But that's how I got in. No football questions, nothing. Just, I had known Mike Shula, Chan Gailey was on that staff, with Jim Bates, just some Christian brothers and just some guys I work with. And but Dave ended up hiring me kind of sight unseen, never asked me a football question.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah, I ain't never heard anything like that, Coach.
Yeah.
Well, that's how I got in. So
that's awesome.
Hey, I want Coach McNally knows how everybody got in. Well, he got in with this guy, Forrest Gregg. Forrest Gregg called me, and a scout recommended me. I don't know if he knows that one. I'm gonna quiz him on that one. He'll probably cuss me out and say, "Troy, you're the one that you're the name dropper." But Coach McNally is the ultimate name dropper. He can tell you everybody, where they coach, who they coached for, who the head coach was. I mean, he's the ultimate name dropper. So how many years were you with the Dolphins, Coach? You got Zach Thomas's jersey there behind you. He's Pro Football Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Talk about that time.
Yeah, I was there 4 years and ended up having him and Junior Seau together.
Wow.
Side by side. It was a phenomenal experience. Zach, probably the greatest player. But again, you coach a great player, he makes you a better coach. I owe a lot to Zach Thomas for bringing it out of me. If he said, "Bob, I need a cut up," he didn't want it yesterday. I mean, he wanted it now. He didn't want it tomorrow. He wanted it now, and he wanted it right. And, he would say, "Hey, Coach, 3 weeks ago, you told me." I said, "Yeah, that was 3 weeks ago, Zach. Now we're doing it, but it was, he checked my oil every day. And, I wanted to be the best linebacker coach I could be because, I kind of had a little bit of bad pride maybe. And, so when we got fired, when Coach Wannstedt quit in the middle of the year, Jim was the interim coach. I ended up calling the defense. I wasn't a coordinator, but I called the defense for the rest of the year. Jim goes to Green Bay as a coordinator, and I end up going with Jim to Green Bay. And when I went in to see Mike Sherman, he said, my good friend, Mark Duffner, who's one of the best linebacker coaches ever, was going to stay. And he said, Bob, if you come here, you're going to have to coach the D-line. So I can remember flying home thinking to myself, oh, man, I wanted to be a linebacker coach. And now, but then I thought, how many guys do I know that have coached two different positions at the highest level? So I kind of took it as a challenge, and met with Rod and everybody I could get to, Bobby Sutton, another great coach, and just helping each other out. And so I was there 1 year when Mike Sherman got fired. So Mike McCarthy comes. We had 6 defensive coordinators in 6 years. So Mike McCarthy kept me as the defensive coordinator so we could keep the same defense because Jim left. And so I was fortunate enough to have 3 years there. We struggled a little bit, 6-10 the first year, then went to 13-3, 14-4, ended up in the Pro Bowl rather than the Super Bowl. But and then the next year had some guys traded, guys hurt, and I was accused of destroying everything Lombardi ever built. You know how that goes. So, but I ended up going to the Buffalo Bills with Dick Duran, and guess what job I ended up getting with Dick Duran was a D-line job because I had coached the D-line at Green Bay. And so Dick Duran was fired in 1 year. So Chan Gailey comes in. Chan keeps me. And one of the guys we had coached at Duke on that 89 team, George Edwards, was the coordinator. Wow. He named the coordinator. So now I was working with the guy we had coached, and he said, Coach Bob, I can handle the linebackers in the back, and I need somebody on the front. Will you coach the outside linebackers? I said, sure. Well, he stayed for 2 years, was replaced by Coach Wannstedt as a coordinator, and Coach Wannstedt moved me back to linebacker. So in Buffalo, I coached 3 different positions in Buffalo. So the point I'm just telling you is don't get pigeonholed. Don't get prideful. Just grow where you're planted because that's God was preparing me. Well, then the next job I got was in Oakland. Well, guess what job that was? Instead of moving back to inside linebackers, guess what job I went to Dennis Allen to work for Dennis Allen? It was an inside linebacker job because I just got done coaching inside linebackers again. Then, when Dennis, was removed and I finished up with Tony Sperano, one of the great offensive line coaches in the history of the game, he got released, and so I was looking for a job again. When Bruce hired me at Arizona, he wanted to hire Mike Smith, and who had just been released at Atlanta, but Mike didn't come. He wanted to hire Dick LeBeau, but he wasn't coming. But Todd had left, and he named James Betcher as his coordinator, and he wanted to hire somebody that had been a coordinator that wasn't going to challenge Betcher. Well, a couple years before, he had been in Indy with Clyde and with Coach Arians. Clyde had brought him to Black Mountain Coaches Camp. Guess whose huddle he was in? He was in my huddle. So he knew me from Black Mountain. So he knew I wasn't going to try to get his job. I had been a coordinator. And here's my interview with Coach Arians. I go into his office 6:30 in the morning. He said, Bob, those guys pick you up okay at the airport? I said, yes, sir. Did they take you to a good supper? I said, yes, sir. He said, if Larry Foote plays, then you're going to coach the inside linebackers. If Larry Foote doesn't play, we're going to let him coach the inside linebackers because that's what he played, and you're going to coach the outside linebackers. You okay with that? I said, yes, sir. He said, let me show you where your office is. God had prepared me for those opportunities. I've been a coordinator. I've been an inside coach, outside coach, a D-line coach. God had prepared me for those situations. So the same thing now. I was actually playing golf when Todd, when I was talking to Todd, walking off the 18th green, he said, hey, we got a job open. I'm not going to interview you. If you're interested, then you can have the job. I said, okay, I'm coming. So I'm walking my buddy. He said, did you just take a job? I said, I guess I did. So that was my year in Tampa. So it was just a phenomenal, the way God blessed me. I think if you just are faithful in the little things and do the things that God calls you to do, with an audience of one, then I think, he will direct your path. He would. Now, Was it like I would have done it? Mm-mm. But again, if I'd been God, I probably wouldn't have chosen Bob Sanders to do some of the things he's allowed me to do. I would have chosen somebody that's better, But God doesn't call the qualified; He qualifies those He calls. So, blessed. I've been very blessed, and I am grateful for the opportunities that I've had.
Yeah, when I went to Virginia Union University, I got to coach for Mark James, who was a high school coach down there in Fort Lauderdale at Dillard High School, and Boyd Anderson, and he brought Mike Spencer, who had been the head coach at St. Thomas Aquinas, and Bruce Arians had recruited to Alabama. And then I think he let him go up to Temple and graduate. I don't know if you know Mike. A lot of people know Mike Spencer.
Yeah, I know him. I don't know him. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, he was one of the first guys I met, and he was just like blown away by me. He was like, "Troy, you're 360." I think he had GA'd for Coach Andrews and for Chuck Amato, because we went up to Akron and met with him when they was coaching up there. But I mean, all the guys you're talking about, he used to talk about, and I was like one of the main recruiters at Virginia Union. And I'd ask Mike, I say, Mike, what should I look for in a linebacker? Because I mean, we were just sitting there today watching Alabama's linebackers and Georgia's linebackers, and I mean, those guys are like, phew. He said, find me a guy that goes up in there and makes a tackle. Like, how do you coach it, Coach? Do you coach it? Can you coach it?
I think you do. I think you have to. Some guys are better at it than others. I told my guys, when I had Zach, he had so many notebooks and notes and stuff that I had to get a filing cabinet for my office so I could get all his notebooks out of the meeting room because it was so messy. So he had his own filing cabinet. And when we played Belichick, up there with the Patriots, I would do drills on plays that they ran against Zach 6 and 7 years prior. And inevitably, Zach said, Bob, I know they're coming back to this play. So we'd work on it in practice. And about the third or fourth play, they were running a play, Troy, you'll appreciate this. They were running a play, that front side wham play, where they have the wing and he whams the 3 technique. They run the belly, which is normally a cutback play. So we would fall back on the belly. And so Zach was so schooled on it. He could patent the fallback on the belly because he could just read footwork so good. Well, so what they started doing, and this was when they first started, they started whamming the front side, run belly footwork, but leave it front side. So Zach, he would have to see that front side wham out the corner of his eye and stay front side. Well, then what they started doing was they would pull the guard weak. So naturally, you got a good linebacker. He's jumping them guards, right? Yeah. But what they were doing, they were pulling the guards weak and whamming front side, still running the belly to the front side. Yeah. So Zach,
someone talked about that. I don't know what they call it. It's like a guard trap and a wham all together, right?
Yeah, exactly. So my point is, Zach knew before that game. He said, "I've seen this before, and I think they're going to do it." So we worked on it in practice. About the third play of the game, he's out there. I told you they were going to run it. I told you. He was screaming on the sideline. I said, "Yeah, good job, man." That's how he was. He told me one time. He said, "Hey, Bob." He said, "Have you seen that gap pass scheme?" I said, "Yeah." As a matter of fact, I have. Been watching tape all day. And he said, "Well, if you notice when they run that gap pass scheme, the guard never looks at the linebacker. He just blocks down. He never looks at the linebacker." He said, "Wow. If I see it, can I blitz it?" So I said, "Well, let me ask Jim." So I go to Bates and I say, "Hey, Zach's seen this thing, and I explained it to him, and he goes, he ain't never going to see that. He's never going to see that." I promise you, about the 5th or 6th play of the game, they ran a gap pass. Zach hit the quarterback right under the chin, having just out of clear blue. He's supposed to be dropped, but he saw that play, bam, and hit it. But that's what the good ones can do. You can't coach that. But as far as getting a guy that's physically tough enough to go downhill and trim fat and keep tight to color and stuff, yeah, I think you have to. Guys that play sideways, you're going to give up big yards. You're going to give up big yards. You're catching tackles. You're catching blocks and you're catching tackles.
Steve, what are you thinking?
No, it's just great to hear, like Coach is saying, a coach listening to his player, especially when he's a student of the game, because you just know that young man's invested and it means so much to him. And he has the freedom to go to Coach Bob and say, "Coach," and obviously that relationship has been built, and it's built on trust, because obviously Zach trusted Coach Sanders enough to go to him and say, and then obviously Coach Sanders trusted Zach because he knew the commitment that he had. So what an incredible relationship, a player-coach relationship that must have been. That's amazing.
Yeah, great dynamics. And, I've been fortunate, because, again, I've been around a lot of good people and a lot of good players. But, for the most part, guys want to be coached. And, heck, I was fortunate enough in Arizona, had Chandler Jones and Marcus Golden. And they were the top outside rush duo in the NFL that, my second year there. And then Marcus got hurt the next year. Chandler was NFL sack leader that next year. But they were the same kind of guys, wanting to be coached and, just want to listen. Aaron Campman, he had, I think, 4 or 5 sacks. And then Robert Nunn, was our D-line coach when I coordinated. And, the way that Jim taught us to rush the passer, we, changed everything about Aaron. And he went to, I think he had 16 or 17 sacks, went to the Pro Bowl one year. Just guys that are willing to listen and trust you, to those, that dynamic of trust is huge. It's huge.
Yeah. Awesome. Another thought comes to my mind. My wife always tells me this, just hearing Coach Bob talk about his career and how he coached the D-line, linebackers, outside backers. My wife always says, Steve, all of life is preparation. And, and when you just trust in the Lord, it's just amazing how things just happen, because, it's prepared you for the next step. And look Coach Sanders' career, how it just prepared him for the next step. Like he even admitted, which is, it wouldn't have been the path that I would have chosen, but it was the path that the good Lord chose. And look at the career he said. So it's pretty awesome. I just love that. Again, I give my wife a lot of credit. All of life is preparation. So what we're doing now is preparing us for something else. It really is.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. If, for the guys that are married, you can be a good dad, and you can be a good husband, and you can be a good coach. I really believe that. You look at Clyde, and you can go around and you can name the guys that have done a good job with those. I just celebrated my 45th wedding anniversary, and
congrats.
There's no way that Team Sanders could have done it without her. Just no way, And so I would challenge guys that are listening, that are married, that are dads, to know and to believe and to work at. I used to take my kids out of school. They were in elementary school, junior high school. I would take them out of school, for a day on a Friday, and I'd take them recruiting with me. I have one sit on my right knee, one sit on my left knee. At night, they're eating hot dogs and popcorn, and we're eating Reese cups. And I bring them home, one on each shoulder. They're passed out. They got chocolate all over them, popcorn in their pants, and everything else. And but that's just, that's what they remember. I took them to Disney World. They never talk about that. They talk about coming to practice, hitting dummies, going to media, or going recruiting women, or going check rooms at night when we used to have to check rooms, So, you can, it was always a family affair, and I would challenge guys to make their lives. I know, Troy, you think about getting married. If you can find, if this girl, don't let her get her eyes checked or anything like that until the time comes. But if you can convince, you must be a heck of a recruiter if you could convince her to marry you. But anyway, all I'm saying,
I can recruit, man.
Yeah,
savage.
Is just realize, man, you can be a good husband, man. You can be a good husband and have a good partner and still coach football at a high level.
Yeah. Hey, Coach Sanders, you talked about Coach Richard Bell. I got to meet him through FCA. His granddaughter works in our athletic office, the graduate assistant.
Oh, really?
Hannah. So they become like best friends while they're here. So it's pretty cool. Small world.
Yeah. Great family. Family.
Yes. Wow.
So, Coach, out of all those head coaches that you work for in the NFL, Dave Wannstedt, you owe a tremendous amount to. And Dave Wannstedt, he's a Jimmy Johnson guy, right, Coach?
Yes. Yeah.
He came
George
up
Hill, George Hill, Jimmy Johnson, George Hill, Jimmy Johnson, Dave Wannstedt, and Jim Bates really put quarters match on the map. A lot of people don't know George Hill, but Jimmy Johnson, George Hill, Dave Wannstedt, and Jim Bates.
I don't want to upset anybody, but my brother was my defensive coordinator one year, and he brought this guy in, And I said, where did you learn this from? And he said, I went to this website. He invented this. I was like, he invented this? He ain't inventing nothing. The reason y'all started playing quarters was because of 21 personnel and y'all could get 9 in the box, right, Coach? I mean,
yeah, no question.
Yeah. So a guy with the website, he didn't invent match quarters.
No.
Wow.
No. And again,
talk about that, Coach. We need to get you on here and give the real match quarters, Coach. Well, what is it all about, Coach?
It allowed us to play aggressive, and it's a great, to me, it's a great team defense because Jim, and I learned this from Jim, when we would get a sack, we had Jason Taylor and Lorenzo Bromell and just a phenomenal front, Tim Bowens and Daryl Gardner. We had a front that was phenomenal. But my point is, when we would get a sack, Jim would say, guys, in the back end, here's why you just got to hold on a little bit. And then when we'd get a knockdown or an interception, he'd put that on and he'd say, guys up front, here's why you got to keep coming, because these guys are going to be on them. They are going to be, when they get off the bus, we are man to man, basically. and so, so it was a great team defense. I mean, the front knew, how valuable it was to get that quick pressure, but the back end knew, hey, we ain't got to hold on long because our guys will get home. So it was a great team defense. We played physical. We were able, it's kind of like that, that national championship game the other day. LSU came out, that women's national championship game. I don't know if you watched it, but the women came out and, they said, hey, we're going to play aggressive. Well, they called a few fouls, but they weren't going to call every foul. And they may call a few pass interference, but they ain't going to call. I mean, so you could stay in, you could, stay, at them good. And rushing with that kind of coverage is a lot of fun. So, but the great thing, I was talking to Clyde, we played Indianapolis when Peyton and Clyde were there. They came to Green Bay and we beat them in Green Bay. And so after it was over, I said, Clyde, I mean, you're my friend. Tell me what you think, this was like a week later. And he said, when we play a lot of those blitzing teams, the Rex Ryans and those kind of, the blitzers, he said, we're in the office at 5 o'clock on Monday morning. We don't go home till 11 o'clock at night, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Sunday, by Saturday, Peyton would have them figured out. And then Sunday was a little bit easier. He said, against you guys, we came in at 8. We were home by 5. He said, but when it got to be Sunday, it was an all-day sucker because we would make our match cover, our quarters, like if you outside release or outside guy, then we would turn outside with you and run like man under, it looked like. But then when we played cover 2, we'd do the same thing and turn outside. So the quarterback would initially think, hey, they're in quarters again. But then he would flip and trap number 2. You know what I'm saying? So we would make a lot of stuff look the same, but it was different, And Clyde said that's what we could never figure out because everything looked the same. The volume of our defense was in the different ways we played. It was a different ways we played different coverages. I mean, the way we may play bunch this way one week, we play bunch a different way this week, or we may play it the first half one way, a different way the second half, and then man-to-man some, Rob low, Rob high, 5-man pressures, So, so it all kind of fit together really good.
So, the best teams to me seem like they do what they do. They do what they do better than what you do. And that's kind of what y'all did. We're going to be a quarters team, and here we go. It's going to look the same no matter what. And, Peyton, he's going to be able to tell by where the safeties line up, where the pressure's coming.
I think early on, a lot of the head coaches, I know Mike McCarthy, it seemed to me this way a little bit, he would get enamored with these blitz teams because it was so hard for him to prepare for the games. And then he would look at us and he'd say, Bob, man, you line up. He said, the defense knows where you are. I said, Coach, that's not but the half of it. He said, what do you mean that's not but the half of it? I said, Coach, we know where we are.
Yeah.
If there was a run that popped, the guys would come to the sideline and Ryan Pickett say, hey, Coach Bob, it was me. I was out of my gap. I said, okay, let's go. It wasn't a lot of problems, but we were flexible enough. If we wanted to slant, we could slant into an under defense, or, I mean, we could move to get to whatever we wanted to. But again, if we could play you straight up and rush, especially when you had some, a good offense, then you were in for a long day.
Who are some of the best offensive coaches that you've ever had to go against?
And
what were so good about him?
Mike Shanahan moved the pocket. I'm just like Kyle, great family. But Mike Shanahan was always tough. I mean, New England with Brady was, a thorn in our side because, in Miami and in Buffalo, we're in the same division. So, those guys up in New England, they always did a great job.
Let me ask you about New England, Coach. Like when Brady gets into that empty and they move that running back out there, I mean, I guess you coach with them, but when they move that running back out there to the trip side of the empty and they get to run that Hoss hitch seam, number 3, get open. I mean, everybody, I'm a high school coach in Richmond, Virginia, and I know it's coming. I mean, and I know the defense knows it's coming. So, I mean, what can you do to stop it?
One thing that I learned from just listening, like you say, you listen to a lot of people, and Jim was a lot this way, but even with Belichick, we tried to take away what you wanted to do. Okay. For example, we may drop a defensive end inside that guy so the DB could play outside. It may be something that we have to come up with something unconventional to do, because just lining up inside and say you're going to take away the outside against some little slot receivers they had, or we used to call it the Falk factor. Kevin Falk, one of the all-time great running back receivers that we played against. We used to call it the Falk factor. It was a factor wherever he was. It was going to be a factor. And what we would do a lot of times, those guys, when they would see us blitz rather than leave the back end, they would free release him. So you'd have to peel off, to take him. So what we would do is they don't even
care if you come in.
We would simulate that look where we bring the guy, but then we may take Falk with the free safety. You know what I'm saying? So we would take Falk with the safety. So when he'd run the wheelie, that safety was on him. So, they were letting one go, but we didn't let their guy go. We just kept figuring things out, trying to stay one step ahead of him. We would play man to man, with that safety behind the look,
So the free safety had the running back. It was really cover 0. So like y'all's Tiger Cat, but you got single safety. I mean, I don't know. I saw that today.
It might be cover 1. It might be cover 1 too.
It might be. And then there's people that are blitz peeling on the running back, like the defensive ends.
But there again, you lose your, the threat of that pressure.
Yeah.
And if we're having a hard time with, Zach Thomas or somebody covering a back, what would make us think that we're going to,
with the defensive end
and stick with this guy, heck, our linebacker coach is scared to death, and so we'll let the defensive end guy peel on him. Yeah, okay.
I mean, that unconventional thing you said. I mean, we were watching Georgia and Alabama's defense today, and I mean, there was times when both those safeties, they were doubling guys on their side of their field. I mean, both safeties, one guy was doubling a guy on this side, and the other one was doubling another guy. And then against Ohio State, I mean, they were doubling number 2. Go ahead, Steve.
That's what we used to call double the stars. You take those 2 guys away, but the problem gets to be, I did a little clinic at Wake Forest. We were talking goal line defense. I see him have to double the stars, and he said, well, what if they got 3 guys that are going to get drafted? I said, well, you better change who you're doubling. So now the quarterback at least has to find a guy with the rush coming in his face on who's not doubled. You know what I mean? So if I just double the inside slot in 1 week all the time, then that's easy. I could put my best guy at number 3 now. Now, heck, I got a mismatch. So we would change who we were going to double. So at least you'd have to find them, or, if they have a good tight end, we play Shockey. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times we hit him before we rushed, with just a down lineman, just a lot of those guys.
Yeah. Wyatt's got a question here, Coach. Wyatt's very loyal. He was on here waiting for you, Coach. If
Okay.
you had a dude on D-line, would you rather have him play the shade 1 gap, or would you want him to head to 2 gap? Where does he help the most? So I guess, are you a one gap or 2 gap?
Normally we were a 1 gap team because we didn't have that kind of guys. Now we had some guys that it would take a couple guys to block him. I mean, Tim Bowen's motto was, "I got my 2, y'all go play." I'll take care of my 2. But it really, what fits your defense the best, I would say, Wyatt. And what does your guy do best? A lot of guys are big enough to play a 2 gap type situation, and some guys aren't. You may have a linebacker. I know one thing we did against Shanahan, then when those inside and outside zones first started, they were stepping so flat. What we did, we got in 2-2s and just came straight ahead. So if they went left, then the linebackers knew they could run to the ball because the D linemen were going to be behind the blocks. You know what I mean? So so we did some different stuff, but I would think it would be whatever whatever your defense calls for. The second thing I would say is a lot of times the center is a very good athlete. I don't know, Steve, you may disagree with this, but sometimes he may not be one of the bigger guys. No, and so we felt like if we could put a big guy on him, we could make him have to be thinking about, hey, I got to get to this guy. I got to get around this guy to get to the linebacker, or I got to cut this guy off. And I know he's a load. And so leaving him in that shade on that center sometimes just by who you're playing, from a game plan standpoint was good for us sometimes.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that answers it, but.
Yeah, Steve, what you got? What you thinking?
I agree with Coach saying, if you got a dude right there, man, right on the shade, right in the center, and taking him immediately, that really automatically, gets the offense attention, line's coach attention. Hey, man, we got to double this guy. So you double this guy, someone else is going to get single blocked. So obviously, then you got to win the 1-on-1 blocks. But no, absolutely, you got a great dude in the middle. It really gets the attention of the offense, and you somewhat have to game plan against that dude in the middle. You really do, because he's a dude.
I think also, depending on, are you playing a third down? I think when you get to third down and you're rushing the passer, I think moving those guys out to 2 gap looks, causes a little bit more problem. Again, depending on what you do with the center, or if you want to ensure some one-on-ones, you get on that center. Now, like Steve said, he's going to have to get a little bit of help, at least early on, until he can get his, himself established again. So again, I think there's some advantages to getting on the head 2 gap alignments, and some, playing depending on who you got. The main thing I would say is don't become a shade 1 gap guy, or don't become a head up 2 gap guy. And the reason I'm saying that, because guys change, guys graduate, guys transfer, guys leave in free agency. If it's the NFL, teams change. And so what you have to do is you have to change too. There is no one way, one scheme, one technique that fits all. There's just not, so.
Yeah, if it was, everybody be running it.
That's exactly right.
That's what Coach Mountjoy would always say. Yeah, there was one thing, everybody would be running it. Coach, I was watching I call it the national championship, but it was the Ohio State versus Georgia game. And I've never seen this. CJ Stroud bootlegs to the right, throws a comeback on the opposite side of the field. Have y'all ever seen this before? And then, Coach, I was like, good gosh. Then once Georgia, Coach, go ahead.
I don't know if that was his first read. I wouldn't say that would be what the coach would recommend. But there again, if you got a mismatch, guys playing too far off, a lot of things you can dictate. That was one thing about our match quarters that we had in Miami and Green Bay. We could eliminate. I got one time when we had a change of staff, I had a really, really good safety coach who joined our staff. And he'd say, well, Bob, what about if this happens? I said, don't worry about it. He said, what do you mean don't worry about it? I said, we don't have that problem. We don't see that. That would not be a problem against us because we're going to be on that dude. Yeah. They're not throwing it back across the field that long when we're sitting on them. Now, it might have been, some kind of blitz and that guy was in a cheat half and, there was a lot of room. Yeah. But I would say somebody's not reacting. If I would want to see what kind of he may have said, hey, when you see that guy go to the back half on the backside, he's wide open. Out there or whatever. Yeah.
Later in the game, they bootlegged to the right. They had a slot on the right who ran a corner ball all the way to the other side of the field behind the comeback, and he hit it. But this number 2, I was like, I've never seen it before.
Yeah, but, a lot of those, a lot of those move to pocket things. They look more, they look like boots, but they're more roll, pull up,
semi-roll.
Yeah. And throwbacks,
Steve, what you got?
Well, along what we're saying, when you have a quarterback who could extend that play a little bit longer, that helps with that long extra pass down the sideline as well too, doesn't it? It really does. I appreciate the Bob Sanders of the world, the Jim McNally's of the world, because Coach mentioned, if you don't adjust and change, you're going to come extinct like the dinosaurs, and that's just wise to. Coach said, don't just become a one-shade guy because, free agency, recruiting, this guy graduates. So you really got to be willing to be a student of the game yourself as a coach because you got to assess your talent every year. No two teams are ever identical back to back. You always have someone leaving and someone coming in, some coaches leaving. So you really have to assess your talent and you got to think, okay, is this quarterback, is he a better passer or is he a better zone read guy, whatever that is, or option guy, whatever that is. So I just think, that's why I think sometimes the best coaching is in the high school level because whatever that gene pool is, Troy, you're getting, you're not doing a whole lot of recruiting per se, So I think it's important that as a coach, you assess your talent and you adjust because if you say, oh, I'm just a run and shoot guy. Well, if you don't have a guy who could throw the ball, well, you could say you're a run and shoot guy all you want. You're going to not win many games. But if you got a great athlete who could run the option, I'm running the option that year, as a coach, because I'm going to see what my talent pool is. And I'm going to, like Coach said early in the conversation, he wanted to know who the 11 best players were, and those guys are going to play. It doesn't matter what position. So I think that's what you have to do. You have to assess your talent and then make sure those guys are on the field because it's still a player's game. And we can sit around all we want and draw on the board we want and think how great we are as coaches and how smart we are. But it's still a player's game. And that's never going to change, right, Coach?
That's exactly right.
No, I appreciate that so much. But I do want to ask you a question. So is it 22 years in college and about 22 years in the NFL, pretty much half and half almost about, or 21?
Actually, 22 in college, had 3 in high school.
Okay.
18 in the NFL and then 1 at the AAF.
That's right. That's right. Okay, good deal. Yeah.
So I had 18 in the NFL.
Yep. Obviously, recruiting as compared to being in the NFL, you're still recruiting per se free agents, right? So I mean, there's still a recruiting process that goes on to a certain extent, or not? Where coaches
to a certain extent, but normally it's who has the most coins wins in free agency. Normally,
right? Yeah.
Again, if you're in Florida, if you're in Florida and you're trying to get a free agent, as opposed to someone in New York or California, the same money is going to give you more pocket change in Florida than it would be. But again, how guys that are in free agency, they also want to know how they fit in and how you're going to use them, because the object in the NFL is to make plays so you make money. That's the guys that make plays.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The more guys you have making plays, the better team you have, and then the more success they have too in getting their contracts right and everything.
Right.
That's a great point, because I had a guy named John Graves who was a captain at Virginia Tech, and he made a couple practice squads. But at Virginia Tech, they always held their gap. I mean, the ball could be hitting anywhere, and that guy's just holding his gap. And when he went to the Texans, I was the stupid coach that told him, I said, hey, man, sign a free agent deal with the Texans. It was the same year they brought J.J. Watt in. And I said, John, do they teach you to hold your gap? He's like, Coach, nobody holds their gap. Everybody's trying to make plays. And I was like, okay.
Hold your gap and then go try to make a play. Hold your gap. In fact, we did that. In fact, one of my guys from Florida in the early 90s, I had breakfast with him in Tampa. He was in Tampa before I left, and he was telling me he was in a couple of camps, and he said, Coach Bob, man, he said the same stuff we learned, because we always had athletes. So we said, okay, how can we get them to make plays? Well, on weak side traps or the sucker plays where the tight end's coming back to block guys, rather than just wrong arm, we tried to hit them as square as we could with our hands, hold our gap, but then stay alive when the ball bounced, because we had athletes could run them down. And they said, Coach, man, this dude started teaching us that and act like he just invented it. And I told him, I said, we've been doing that for 6 or 7 years at Florida. We did that a long time ago. That's just stuff, because we always try to keep our guys active and moving. And
trying to say why take them out of the play? That was Mike Spencer was big at that too. Trap the trapper, why? Well, we're gonna close it down and we're gonna make the tackle.
Yeah, I think a coach's job, Wyatt, or anybody, a coach's job is to get their guys in the best position to make a play. I used to always tell my guys, you keep running, you run at this angle, don't follow the same color jersey, whatever, boom, boom, boom. If the ball stays on his feet long enough to get to you got to be in position to make the play. So you may be the first guy, the second guy, the eighth guy, or the 11th guy. I don't know which guy you are, but the technique will take you there. Technique takes a bad player and makes him average. The average player, it makes him good. The good player makes him great, and the great player makes him a Hall of Famer. That's what techniques do. So I think when you coach techniques and you understand techniques and you make that, the fundamentals, when you make that the foundation of what you're doing, then I think you're in position to be a great coach, because you have to be fundamentally sound, in my opinion.
That's a golden nugget right there, teaching the fundamentals and techniques, because so many times people just want to scheme, but my goodness, you take away the fundamentals of your individual, you're really, that's just the start of a fall, in my opinion.
You'd be surprised the number of guys I had throughout my career in the NFL, when they would come to rookie mini camp, every day, an individual, I would just set a bag about 10 yards from them and just have them come and to balance up, so they can move right, and then I make them move right or left. They never learned how to come under control, just to come under control a little bit,
To gather themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to, so the fundamentals are everything for great football players.
That's awesome. Wow. Coach, let me change the subject just a little. How many of your players who have gone into coaching, and how many players, give me some unique professions they went into, like doctors, lawyers? I mean, I'm just curious of some of the guys that you have coached that you keep in touch with. And do you have an astronaut out there? I'm just curious of some of the guys you have coached.
Michael Gilmore from Chipley, Florida, out there near you. He and his wife built a children's hospital wing on at Shands Hospital. Michael Gilmore.
Yes.
Of course, Danny. At Shands.
That's where my son got his treatments at Shands, as you know, in Gainesville. That's where my son got
out. Michael Gilmore, the kids unit there. Him and his wife built it. He's a great orthopedic surgeon out there in the Panhandle. Of course, Danny Werfel, had the great schools and started schools in all a lot of the big cities, and the Ninth Ward there in New Orleans.
Yes.
I had one of my players is they sell really, really outstanding sales reps for pharmaceutical companies. Some high school coaches, that I coached, some guys up there. Mark Campbell and those guys were up there at Lake City. I don't know if you ever go through Lake City.
Yeah, that's not my area, but I know. I kind of go through. I kind of do more panel.
Shea Showers and, Mark, those guys were, high school coaches. Ian Scott was a strength coach there with the Panthers.
Yes.
Just, it's fun to kind of look back and see where they go. Titus O'Neil. I don't know if you're a wrestling fan. You ever hear of Titus O'Neil?
Yeah.
That guy played for me. He's Thad Bullard. He played for me at Florida.
Really?
Titus O'Neil. No, he's a great wrestler, so one of the unique guys.
That's awesome.
So a lot of fun.
There's so many kids out there and parents who, they want their son to get recruited. They want their son to get this offer. You've coached at University of Florida. You've coached in pro football. And, social media, you don't have a Twitter or anything like that. But, going on these visits and taking pictures in uniforms and courting the kids. And, what can a kid who is a 9th or 10th grader, what should they focus on as a student athlete in high school to ensure that they have the best chance to play college football, or possibly, if they're one out of the whatever million, to play pro football?
Yeah, I have a grandson in the 9th grade, so I have this conversation with my daughter and his dad all the time. But to me, I think if you're the best version of yourself, there are no secrets anymore because of all those things you just said. There could be a guy at the University of Mars and Wasamata U. It don't matter if they can play. The NFL or colleges will find them. That's just how it is now, because there's too much media. There's too much media attention. So to pay these guys and, my daughter was talking about paying this guy $1,000 to get on some recruiting deal. And I said, no, I wouldn't do it. The other thing I would encourage guys, I encourage my grandson, but a lot of times it goes on deaf ears. I think the more you compete at whatever it is, I think you get better as a competitor. When I sit down at my living room table in the summer and I play a game with my grandkids, they know I'm going to try to bury them. They know that, and it's fun. They try to bury granddad. That's what they like. They like that because they're competitors. They're all on travel teams and they compete, and they enjoy that. But I would say play more sports, too, because I think a guy that's running track or a guy that wrestles, one of the toughest sports ever. Those guys, you can look at those guys. We used to love guys that wrestle, play basketball, watch them at a track meet, all those guys, all those situations, but it kept them competing on edge. You guys said, well, I'm going to concentrate on baseball. I said, man, you're going to get a headache by the end of the year. You just concentrate on one sport like that. Just keep playing, just play and have fun. And, when you play with fun and, you get used to competing, and I just think that helps you just develop in different ways, and, I just think that helps you. But I don't know about all those. Steve would be much better. I think if you're good enough that, that people are going to find you. That's what I think.
What about grades? Like some guys, talk about that, Coach.
Oh, grades are everything. Here's what I told my grandson just about 3 days ago. I said, the thing about grades is this. Number one, if you don't have them, then nobody can recruit you. Number two, if you don't have them, but you got enough, a few schools may be able to recruit you. But if you got grades and you play the same, then now the options that you have are magnified. So you just have more options for yourself. A lot of guys want to fall into the trap. I told my grandson, all these knuckleheads, they love company. They want you to be a knucklehead because they're a knucklehead. So you got to be the best that you can be in everything that you do. And that's what coaches look for. I don't know. And I'm sure Steve does the same thing. If I could find the janitor at the school, I would ask him about Joe Blow. If I found if I ate lunch in the cafeteria, I would ask if anybody I could find, the head chair, whoever it was, I would say, hey, what about, Steve Spurrier? What kind of guy is he? Does he leave his tray laying around, or, but when you are a good guy, I did a little thing in Arizona last year. I sat down and I said, I did two things. I'll share with you. We were talking about leadership. And I said, okay, talk to me about your junior high and high school teams, college teams, about the best leaders on your team. And so I just would go around the room, and you couldn't say the same thing somebody else said. So I went around the room 2 or 3 times. So everybody had to think and come up with different things. And we wrote them on the board. And I said, okay, guys, name one characteristic on the board that is impossible for you to have.
Wow.
And there was none.
Wow.
The point was, you can be a leader if you want to. If you can't be a leader, then these are the criteria you're looking for. Find one and get behind him. So, just learning what the characteristics, they're on time, they're accountable, they're available, they got good character, they got integrity, they care about their teammates, they love one another. They play hard, they're always there, they're enthusiastic. It went on and on and on and on and on. And I said, name one. I said, hey, can you be enthusiastic? Yes. Can you be on time? Yes. Can you be accountable? Yes. Can you learn the playbook? Yes. Can you love your brother just like you love yourself? Yes. It went on and on. I did the same thing in the pass rush. All these things, I'm new. Okay. I'm trying to coach all these things. Well, I call them TikTok rushes. Guys get on TikTok and they see these drills, they're running through the bags, they're kicking their heels up. They're doing so. The first few days I'm looking at stuff. So what I did is I put a tape together of NFL sacks last year. I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through this tape and we're going to see the things that work and what doesn't work. So we go through, and I had one of the rookies up on the board. So when you saw something, hey, that works, pad level get off. Hey, turn the corner, third step in, long arm, low man wins. All these things. We go through all these things. We wrote them on the board. Here's what doesn't look. High pass, slow get off. High pass, exposing your chip. All these things. We wrote them on the board. So we had a long list of things that worked, long list of things that didn't work. Guess what? Those guys watched the film and they called it out, and the rookie wrote it on the board. Well, guess what? They were the same characteristics I had been trying to coach them.
Wow.
For 2 weeks. And they said, Coach, we understand what you're saying. I said, I didn't say it. You guys just said it. You watched the tape. You saw it. I see the same thing you do. That's what coaches do. We see what works, and then we try to get our guys to do it. We see what doesn't work, and we try to keep our guys from doing it. So as I said, you guys said, so when they would do it in practice, I said, wait a minute. You said that stinks, and you did it anyway. Now you tell me either you're not very smart or you don't care. I know you're smart. So you must not care enough about it to eliminate that from your game, because I know you're smart because you're the one that said to write it up on the board. So guys are intelligent and they can understand that when they coach themselves. So there were 2 things I think that if you do with your segment, I think can help you develop some leaders and some pass rushers maybe.
That's a great life lesson, Coach. That's awesome.
Just one of my former players down here. That's great advice for parents and students. So he appreciated you sharing that about the grades and everything and being a leader, Coach.
Yeah. Coach, I got to ask a question. You talked about all those great professions some of your players went into. As much as you love fishing and golfing, you mean not one of your ex-players developed some fishing lure to guarantee you're going to catch fish, or a golf club that guaranteed a hole-in-one?
I wish. You can lead a horse to water, but it's hard to make him drink. I played golf for fellowship, and I'm not. Like I told my old coach today, was messing with me. I said, Coach, I'm not going to practice until I get better. I'm not going to waste my time practicing. But I'm a fisherman at heart, and had a good day yesterday. We caught a bunch of sea trout. The problem is I ate them all out. I ate them all last night, like I had a tip on the famine. So I got to back off some of that eating, but. A good day yesterday.
That's good. What's the best about Coach Sanders? He's a fisherman of men. He's a man. He builds men through football, and I love that about him. I really do. Boy, this has been great.
Coach Sanders, is there anything else that you would like to cover with the clinic or what, maybe something for the coaches. You talked about the players, and you talked about, the parents, but is there any for the coaches that might be watching, the young coaches, the old coaches, whoever, coach?
The old coaches, I'd say make sure you mentor the young guys. The young guys, I'd say find you some guys you want to, that you want to be like, and just like you did today. Hit schools, hit campuses, learn as much as you can. The second thing is I just want to say thank you to Troy and Steve for allowing me to be on the podcast tonight. It's humbling, and when you're an old coach, just to have the opportunity to get on and talk some football with good friends and good people, I just am humbled, and I appreciate it very much that you allowed me to do it. The third thing is I had a good friend that was on our staff at Florida. A lot of you guys know him, Buddy Tevens. He's a head coach at Dartmouth. Was riding his bike and was in a horrific accident over on A1A, and is in pretty bad shape. So I would just ask you, just from your fellow coaches, just make sure that if you do talk to the Lord tonight, just mention Buddy and the doctors, and that he's gonna get back going again. But it was very horrific accident that he was in. Just want to remember, I think coaches have to stick together. It's a tough job, but I'm just grateful that there are guys like you two guys and a lot of guys you mentioned, the Coach McNally's, and a lot of guys that, that have been mentioned tonight that do it, because I think that coaching is the last bastion of discipline in the country. There's a lot of bad things happening in our country. There's a lot of bad things you hear about. I believe that 98% of young people are great and 2% are sorry. And the only thing we ever hear about is a 2%. There's so many life lessons that football teaches. So many things, teamwork and pulling together and discipline, and when the going gets tough, the tough get going. A lot of cliches that you hear, but it's true about football. And so I would encourage any administrator that's listening. When I was recruiting, the best high schools I went into had the best athletic programs, and I'm talking about in the halls were clean. They were quiet during class. They were orderly during breaks. They were all good athletically, all sports, women and men. The schools that I went in, that were chaos, that were, dirty, and, were schools that were not very good athletically. Now, I don't know. I'm making that correlation myself because that's what I saw. And I can only give testimony to what I know. And so I would, my hat goes off to you, Troy, because I think you have the toughest job, a lot tougher than coaching at Florida and a lot tougher than coaching the Green Bay Packers. You have the tough job. You are where the rubber meets the road. So
where the rubber meets the road, man. That's what my mentor said.
The
rubber meets the road.
I love high school coaches, and I'm very grateful for high school coaches. I'm grateful for my high school coaches, and I'm grateful for what you guys do. I'm grateful for college coaches. I'm grateful for friends, mentors. We're all in it together, and I'm just grateful that you had me on tonight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, the rubber meets the road. My mentor, Jimmy Rogers, he was an Army Ranger coach. Have you ever seen a coach eat glass before a game?
No.
Coach, my guy, he was the hardest of the hard. And
our preacher says that at the end of every sermon, he says that he thinks his church, and I think this as coaches, are like coaching Navy SEALs. And we're deployed to all these different areas to fight the battles every day, just like Christians go out, just like Christian Navy SEALs, and you go out to your jobs, and so when you look at how important your job is, Billy Graham said that a coach has more influence on the youth of the nation than a pastor does in a whole year. So again, thank you to high school coaches for what you do, and thank you for the podcast. thank you, Steve, for being the friend that you are.
Thank you.
And family, and I just love you guys and appreciate the opportunity for an old man to come on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Coach. I'm gonna
Love
press
you, Coach.
in. I'm gonna press in. Y'all stay on here, okay?
All right.
Thank y'all for tuning in. Our sponsors, Rack Coach, Tip of the Spear, the Top Hopper. Use the code Top Hop, and then Sports Workbook. Y'all the best.